So I'm going to be doing a demonstration on how to use Nano, which is a very common text editor. I've downloaded this file from Canvas called lovestory.txt, and I've moved it to the directory that I want to be working in. And so if I type ls, of course, I can see this file here. And if I wanted to take a look at this file, we would use the command less, using tab completion to finish out the name of the file. When I open in less, I can see that these are the lyrics to Taylor Swift's song Love Story. And I can scroll up and down using the arrow keys on my keyboard. But you can't actually edit this file. Less is just for looking at this file. So if we want to edit, we're going to use the command or the text editor Nano. In order to get out of less, of course, I'm going to hit lowercase q. So if we want to open this file using the text editor, we're simply going to type the word nano, all lowercase, and then lovestory.txt. And when we open this, we notice at first that it doesn't really look that much different from what we would see in less. There are a couple of differences. We can still scroll up and down, but this time we notice that our cursor is actually on the file, and we can also scroll left and right, not just up and down. You may also notice that up in the top left corner, you're going to see your version of Nano that you're working with, which may differ depending on what system you're on. And then you'll also see the title of the file in the center. And at the bottom, we have all of these different options that we can use to make edits to this file. Now, Nano by default doesn't usually save the changes that you make to a file. So anytime you do that, you're going to be prompted to save the edits that you make when you exit. And I'll show you how to do that in just a second. So let's say we wanted to add a line to the top of this file, and I want to leave a blank line between the first line and then the line that I'm going to create. So what I want to do is move my cursor to the first letter of this file. Now press enter, and that will insert a new line. Then I can use the arrow keys to scroll up to the top and type whatever I want, just as we would in a normal document or any other text editor. Right, but then let's say I've made a mistake and I actually don't want to save these changes. And so what I'm going to do is Control Exit, and that is going to prompt me to save or not save the changes I've made in this file. So anytime you see this caret symbol, that's going to mean Control. And so I hold down Control and just Control and X. And that's going to say, do you want to save this? I'm going to hit N for no, I don't want to save this. And if we open that back up in Nano again, we notice that the changes I made are in fact not there. And there are several errors throughout this file, so we're going to be using Nano to fix those. The first thing we notice here is it says lyrics by Travis Swift. And we know that this song is actually written by Taylor Swift. And so we're going to backspace over Travis and type in Taylor Swift. And so now that's correct. The next thing we notice is that most of these lines throughout this file fit within our reading frame so we can see the whole thing. But with this first line here, we see that it sort of goes off the page and then it ends in this arrow at the very end of the line. And that doesn't mean that the line ends in a literal arrow. We can scroll all the way to the right and we can see that there's actually more if we move the line over. And so a shortcut to jump to the beginning and end of a line is Control A for the beginning and Control E for the end. So A and E. Now, another thing you may want to do is be able to see the entirety of that line, even though it runs off the page. And a way that we'll do that is, again, using another shortcut within Nano. So if you're on a Mac, this key is going to be different from Alt. On a Windows computer, the key is going to be Alt that I'm using. But on Mac, it might be your Command key or your Option key or maybe even your Escape key. You might just have to play around depending on your version of Nano that you have. So on a Windows computer, I'm going to hold down Alt, Shift, and $sign. And what this enables is something called soft wrapping of overlong lines, right? And I can toggle back and forth between soft wrapping and hard wrapping using that same command. So Alt, Shift, and $sign, and that will turn on hard wrapping or soft wrapping depending on what I want to see. Now, keep in mind, this actually does not change the file. It just changes the way you're viewing the file. If we wanted to jump to the end of the file, we're going to do Alt//, and that's going to send us all the way to the end of the file so that we can make edits there. If we wanted to jump to the beginning of the file, we're going to do Alt//. Another thing we might see is that as we're looking at this in soft wrapping, we realize that each line of this particular part of the song is separated with these forward slashes. So maybe we want to move where these forward slashes are to subsequent lines. And so I can go to each one of these using my arrows, and I can backspace where the forward slash is and just press enter, and it will move that line, that the remaining part of that line to a new line. And so it actually inserts a new blank line by doing this. So I'll do this on the rest of these. And so now we have this portion of the song looking a lot better here. Now, the next thing we notice as we're scrolling through, we see that these are indeed the lyrics to Taylor Swift's Love Story. But when we get to this fourth group of lyrics here, we see that there's actually another song here, and we want to get rid of these lines. And to do that, we're going to use the shortcut for cutting an entire line, and that is Control K. And so Control K, when we use it, is going to cut the entire line, right? And so we're going to do that with all four of these lines. Control K also removes blank lines. So if I see two blank space lines here, I can do Control K again to remove that one. But let's say I mess up and I accidentally Control K a line of the actual song. That's okay. We can do Control U to paste it right back. Keep in mind, though, that Control U only pastes the most recent thing that's been cut. So if you cut multiple things and then try to paste it, it's only going to paste the most recent thing. Now, there's another problem with this song, and it's at the end. So I'm going to use Alt// to jump to the end. And you might not know it, but there's actually another line of O's that needs to be included here. And so we're going to copy and paste these O's onto another line, since there should be another row here. And the way that I'm going to do that is use Control-Shift-6. Now, Control-Shift-6 sets a mark. And that mark, when we move to the right, we see that it continues to highlight where I've started that mark. And this is saying, this is the stuff that I want to copy. Once we're done with that, we're going to do Alt-6 to copy. And then to paste, we're going to use the same as we did before with Control K. So Control U, right? And so now we have added another line of O's here, making the song correct. Now, there's one more subtle detail here. I'll go back to the top using Alt backspace, backslash to get back to the top of the file. And if we look through, we see that in some of these lines here, it says, "It's a love story, baby, just say no." And in fact, it should say, "It's a love story, baby, just say yes." And so we're going to use a find and replace to go through this file and change all of the no's to yes. Now to do this, we're going to use a series of commands here. We're going to use Control W. And when we type this, the first thing that comes up is this search. And search is asking you, what do you want to search for? Well, we're going to search for the word no. In our case, we're not really worried if it's case sensitive right now, but you can change the parameters using these options down here for exact matches. So we're just going to match the word no. And when I hit enter, it will show me the first instance of the word no. In order to go to the next one, we're going to use Alt and W. And that will go to each subsequent occurrence of the word no. Now you notice on some of these, it's actually catching the word KNOW because the word no is embedded within that. So it's just matching the pattern. It's not actually looking for the word. But that just shows us where those occurrences are. So if we want to replace them, we're sort of going to do the same thing. We'll start with Control W. And then if we want to enable replace, we're going to use Control R. And the first thing it's going to ask us is, what do you want to replace? It says to replace here. So we want to replace no, and then we hit enter. And then what do you want to replace it with? We want to replace it with YES and hit enter. And then it's going to go through each instance of the word NO, of the letters NO throughout this file and ask us if we wanted to replace them. If we want to replace all of them, we would hit A. If we want to replace that specific instance, Y, and not that specific instance, we hit N for no. So we don't want to replace this instance because we don't want to change this to yes. We hit N. We do want to replace this, so we'll hit Y. And then at the end, it's going to tell you we replaced 4 occurrences of this. Once we're done with that, we want to save the changes that we made. So we're going to use Control X, and it's going to say saved modified buffer. We want yes, so we're going to type Y. And then it's going to allow us to either hit enter and save the changes under the same file name, or we can edit this file name. So I can go back and maybe I want to type the word correct, right? Because this is a correct version. Once I do that, I'm going to hit enter, and it's going to say save the file under a different name, and we're going to type Y. Yes. And so now if we ls, we see that we have the original file here, lovestory.txt, and then we also have the corrected version. And so we could, of course, look at those with less, or we could open those back up in Nano.